Welcome to the Executive Coach Podcast, and today's conversation is a part 2 conversation of one that I started with Fiona English. And if you're just dropping in today, I encourage you to go back and listen to part 1 of this conversation. Today we're going to have a deepening of some of what we discussed there, and in particular we're going to start looking into Dharma. And I'm going to hand over to Fiona. She started to talk about this last time and how this relates to our current global context. So Fiona, hi. Great to have you back. Would love to hand over to you to take that conversation a bit further that we started last time.
Sure. So I suppose maybe by way of introduction, just for people that haven't come across my work before, I speak and write about a lot of topics, including authenticity, self-actualization, but probably what I'm best known for is speaking about purpose and purposeful leadership. And, it's interesting, even maybe just to give some context of how my work in that started, because we did the same masters. I had been feeling a call, so I worked in investment for 20 years, and I definitely found that as kind of the world became more polarized, as problems seemed to be growing, I was feeling this inner call to I'm not having enough impact in the world. And as part of that, I suppose my first step of understanding that was to go off and to go inside and to ask myself some questions. And it's the first step that I recommend to everybody else. I'm like this, I suppose non-deliberate action is not what the world needs right now. It needs people who are really taking seriously who they are and who they want to be in the world. And as part of my master's research, I researched spirituality, and purpose and spirituality are very highly correlated. So I ended up kind of developing a lot of expertise in purpose. And originally I was a bit reluctant to be seen as somebody who was an expert in the space, even though I was, and I continued to research and write about it, because I felt purpose had become this topic that was just so overused. I would turn on social media and see find your purpose and what's your purpose. And I'd be like, oh my God, I just need to get off this. Just stop with all this kind of find your purpose. Not because I have a problem with people wanting purpose, but because I thought it had become so whitewashed, that there had been this universal, I'm just searching for my purpose and no outcome to that. So I remember the first time I was asked to speak about it, I almost turned it down because I was like, oh my God, do I want to be another person talking about purpose in the market? And the person who asked me knew me and had seen me on stage a number of times. And he said to me, that's why I'm asking you. He said, because you have a no bullshit kind of approach to things. And he said, that's why he goes, you will resonate with people. So that kind of started me going, okay, let's take this seriously, and how are you going to bring that together? So when I speak to audiences, one of the things I often say that my work is really about identity, and I speak and write about purpose and purposeful leadership and self-actualization and authenticity and spirituality, but what they all share is the concept of identity. And the question I'm really asking people is, in the world today, a world that is in flux, where the world order is changing, where we're all being called to influence that world, who are you and how do you want to show up in the world? And for me, purpose is an expression of identity. It's not something that you find externally, it is something that you find internally. And that was how, when we spoke on the phone last week, we ended up talking about Dharma, because, the first rule of Dharma is to, cultivate and understand who you are in the world, so you can recognize the unique gifts you can have, and so that you can live in alignment with those gifts and the contribution you're supposed to make to the world. And I take that very seriously, as in, what's purpose? And I'm not looking for this one thing, this kind of mountaintop that I'm going to climb. I am looking for, who is the person that I need to become to manifest the purpose and the impact that I want to have in the world. So that is, I suppose, as an intro, that is the way that I see purpose. And it is, for me, purpose and leadership are almost the same thing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I love the way that you talk about Dharma, because I first interacted with this word as I was in my teens, and my religion is I'm a Jain, and that is a very spiritual religion, and we talk about Dharma. It's a core part of that. So I love the fact that this is something that you bring in rather than just purpose, because I find it so much more three-dimensional. It has that spiritual underpinning. So if I was to ask you, I know you've mentioned it once, but if I was to ask you to define it for people so that they can really have that sink in, what that meaning is of Dharma, what would you say?
But for Dharma, within, I suppose, some of the Eastern traditions, they would say that the first step is to get clear on who you are and what your unique gifts are and how you're going to use those in contribution for society. When I'm on stage, I never use the word Dharma. I always talk about the idea that, you know, purpose is an expression of your identity. So you want more purpose, then become the person capable of birthing that purpose. Like, you know, that you are feeling the need to do something more in the world, then you need to become the person that is capable of birthing that. And that you have to take risks for that, and you have to be willing to sacrifice for that. You know, it's not this thing you're going to find. Like, you know, both of us are coaches. I would never describe our purpose as being coaches. That is one expression of what brings purpose to our life and our work, you know. So for me, what I often say, and I'll come back to Dharma now in a second, is that, you know, your life it's not about finding this one purpose. It's that there are vehicles in your life for expressing the person you are, and they will bring you purpose. So, you know, you express who you are through your relationships, you express who you are through your work, and getting right who you are will then offer you that expression of purpose that you're seeking in your life. What you're really looking for is for your life to be impactful, for your life to matter. And you're not going to find that by grasping to one thing as core to your identity. You're going to find that by being really clear about the person that you want to become and taking action steps to become that person through your relationships, through your work, and through clarity of the contribution that you want to make. And for me, that is very aligned with the definition of Dharma, which I don't want to define it per se because it's not mine to define. I always feel that that's a bit of me appropriating somebody else's definition for myself. And the last thing I'll add to that is the reason it came up in our conversation last week when we were chatting on the phone was I keep on, in the chaos of the world right now, when it's so easy to be pulled outside of yourself, it's so easy to be angry, it's so easy to be taking action, but maybe not action that is forwarding the version of your work and the impact that you want to have. I keep on coming back to the word Dharma because it grounds me. I'm like, what's your Dharma here, Fiona? Like, what is your true calling for what you're supposed to be doing in the world? Because there are so many ways that I could action myself, action my desire to be of impact in the world at the moment. But that word always feels like it's very rooted. It's very like deep in the body in terms of who are you and what are you supposed to be doing. And mine is different to somebody else's. Just because somebody else cares deeply about actioning it in a certain way doesn't mean that that's what I should be doing or what you should be doing. So that understanding of identity and clarity of identity and clarity about the uniqueness that you bring really grounds me when I feel like, oh my God, I should be doing more in this moment. You know, it brings me back to what is your long game here, Fiona? Because that's how we change the world. Yes, there are great urgency around certain things in the world at the moment, but beyond that, you know, who are you going to be and what is the impact you're going to have with your whole life? Because we have to be playing the long game here. You know, even if we solve some of the most urgent crises that we have in the world, we have multiple problems to overcome. And that will involve a lot of clarity and commitment to contribution from us all. So I'll stop there because I've kind of given a multifaceted answer, but you know me, I'm very particular about how I talk about things. So the distinction between them all matters to me.
Absolutely. And I've been making a few notes because there's so much in what you said there that I want to pick up on. Long-time listeners of this podcast know that I bang on about vision all the time. And I actually think we're quite aligned in the way in what you've said there, because when I help people cultivate their vision, we absolutely take their unique blend of gifts and values and construct that vision. Mm-hmm. Now, I've typically, and even when I've run this as masterclasses and things like that, I do get asked the difference between purpose and vision. And I've been relatively clear to say, I offer people vision because I don't want to dictate whether somebody has a strong sense that they want to make a particular impact or whether actually what their vision for their life is just different from that, right? Maybe they are in a job that is burning them out and they need to be in a more spacious place before they can even get to anything like that if they want to. I don't even want to prescribe that people need to have that. So what I like about vision is that I wanted the thing that was the most flexible, right? What I love there is that you're layering within that vision, that opportunity to think about impact. And I think it's a really inspiring question. And I know that when we talked on the phone earlier this week, and I was sharing with you some of my emotional experience, when you asked me that question, what is your Dharma? It immediately did ground me. It immediately, a lot of that noise just fell away. Because that is the power of that word Dharma, is that it is this sort of very timeless, non-urgent in some way word. It's very deep And I like the fact that some words actually carry their meaning. They hold their meaning in even the way they sound. I agree with you that it is a great way, and we do need grounding right now. And I think even the word and coming back to that is a way of rerouting ourselves and hugging that tree and putting our feet on the ground.
Yes. To differentiate between what is urgent, which is necessary, it's not to take away from the urgent matters that we're seeing in the world right now, but also something in you has been sparked. Something in you has been sparked about the devastation that we're witnessing, but beyond that, the power structures and the inequality that we're seeing in the world. So if something of you has been sparked, you need to have a long-term plan or a vision. I've heard you talk about visioning before, and it's influenced me, you know, just in terms of reminding me to have a vision sometimes as well. But something has been sparked in terms of how you want to bring forth that kind of vitality, that potential that you have to have an impact. And I think that not to get caught up in just what you can do today, but what can you do with your whole life, because that's how we build better worlds, better communities, better families, whatever it is, by having that long-term vision.
Absolutely. And the other note that I wrote down as you were talking was that you may need to coach me a little bit on this call about some of that to coax it out of me, because I've done plenty of vision work, but I am now, and in fact, my vision that I recently did, it started with my global vision, you know, what I want to see in the world. Before I could zoom down to my own life, I started actually with that global. So that was a new thing that I have built into my own personal work. But I did experience this week a dark night of the soul of my own, where I was very tearful. My kids also heard me talking to my husband about how I was feeling, and they were like, "Mummy, are you crying?" And I was like, if this is what my response is, it's not just today. It's been like this on and off for the last couple of years, or however, since before 2023 Christmas. Then there's something there, Maya. You need to now take this stuff, and you need to think about how you put beautifully, Fiona, you say, how do you transmute that? Because if this is cutting you in a specific way, then what is that trying to tell you? So that's
coming up for me, and you just mentioned it there. So maybe for listeners to say, I wrote a piece earlier in this year, and we can share it in the show notes, where I said to people, this is a moment to transmute anger into right action. So when I'm listening to you, I'm wondering what your right action is.
Yes. And like I said, I don't think this is fully formed, but I can tell you where I've got to with it. So part of this dark night of the soul was to say, okay, look, Maya, that you have a particular spot for women and children, right? I also care about all humans, but particularly those two groups. I will be quite vocal about where I see women being oppressed or repressed, and then children. And so I do this work with a social work charity. I coach the social workers, and I do that because I like the fact that I can work with a lot of them, and then they go out and do their work. So I feel like I'm using my best skills to support them to go and do the work that they do as social workers, which is such important work. And that's been a really useful thing to see that working, and for me to go, actually, that type of work is possible for you. You can do that. So one of the things that I'm now going to have my eyes and ears open to, and I've started to research and have a bit more of a short list of other potential charities that are in the space of refugees, war child, those type of categories, where I can maybe see if they might need my support. But I don't see this happening overnight. I don't see them suddenly having a vacancy. I've done the kind of bushy-eyed version of this in my 20s, where I've reached out a lot, and you don't always hear from organizations, and right now they can clearly be overloaded. But to me, I'm saying, look, you know what? I'm just planting my seeds here. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do some research. And I know, because this is what's happened for me, that when I do that, sort of opportunities and alignment will occur, and there will be ways that I will be able to connect with some of these organizations and support them in different ways, obviously via donation, but then thinking about, is there something more that with my particular skill set that I can offer them, as I have already been able to do with one charity. Because what I did learn, I tried to do charity board work, and I realized that was not for me. Even though I like the idea in theory, it was just too high level for me. So actually I do like to be able to support in some way that is a bit more direct. And for me, that is often through my kind of coaching skill set, probably, if that is going to be of use to some of these groups. So that's my long term. And that's why I loved what you said about how yes, there is urgency today. And so you do what you can today, but knowing that actually this has activated something that could have a longer term ripple effect for the way that I choose to go about different things, and build that into my work and even my business. And actually a lot of this thinking that I've been doing here is going to be able to be folded into that and to be able to support others along that vein. I feel really inspired by that, because I know that I can fold in some of this, because we said this is leadership stuff. This is about how either we lead teams, we lead ourselves, we lead beyond. I say the big women, mothers are often like the biggest leaders, absolutely. Right? Because they're leading. And so there are so many different versions of leadership where I think that having enriched thinking on this is going to be valuable. So I'm starting to see possibilities, and I'm not needing to solve it all. But I love the fact that I was stuck for quite a long time in frustration, and why does everybody else not feel like I feel? That was my most common. Why is everybody else not crying? Or that was where I was stuck. And now I've been able to move past that a little bit and say, actually, everybody has their own Dharma, and this is now showing me a little bit more what mine is. It's not new. There've been versions of it along the years. I've experimented. I've tried to do different types of work when I was in corporate social responsibility. So I've seen it keep evolving. It's not brand new, but now I can see maybe the next level of it that I have previously not wanted to access. I feel a little bit more ready to access that stuff.
There's so much you want to say about that, but I actually want to ask you a question that was coming up for me as you're talking. I totally understand. Board work it might be somebody else's Dharma, but I totally understand why it might not be yours. I feel that way sometimes, that I want to be in the thing rather than overseeing the thing a lot of the time. And I wondered when I was listening to you was, you kind of have two options. You can provide a support function to people, so social workers and thing, and you're definitely using your skill set. So that's very aligned with Dharma. Like nobody's asking you to go off and do something different. Like Dharma is very much saying you have all the skills, you just have to decide what to do with them. And I really like that. And is it a case of you want to support existing people doing that kind of work? Or is there a version where you create something that is providing structures or support to those people? And there's a differentiation for me, and I wondered whether you had thought about that. And sorry, both are fine. I just wondered whether you have an idea of what that looks like for you.
Yeah, I love the daily act of the support function, like being able to show up on a call for people. And actually, I think the second part, which is the refreshing leadership part, which is the new name of the business and things, that's where I see the opportunity to create something, in the sense that I already have various pillars in my coaching programs that I take people through, various exercises and things like that. And so I can see myself building some of that out, which is both crystallized insights, but then also work that I do with people. So I see the create something as not something brand new over there. I see it as building on stuff that is already in place, the business, like the podcast, and the nature of my coaching work. Because my coaching work has never been an empty space container. It has always had pillars. It's always had a way of thinking. And that's why I like the idea that I can now start to incorporate some of this layer of thinking in more. I love in your work, Fiona, you've done explicit research on spirituality. I've had my own personal sort of spiritual background via meditation and even the Jainism. And so I've always known that there is one layer there of work that I want to deepen. And I see this as all being part of that kind of a spiritual dimension, making its way more closely into my work. Beautiful. So as well as me taking the time to deepen my own spiritual practice, which I've done on and off over the years in different ways, I wish to continue doing that. And I feel that this is a call to a lot of that.
And I love that word calling, because as I'm listening to you, I just hear you getting more and more clarity about what this kind of, let's call it the intervention of the world, is driving you towards, where you're like, actually, I'm absolutely inflamed by this. And this has just created, urgency around my own drive forward to implement things, the contribution I feel that I should make.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say urgency, I would say activation.
Yeah.
I would say it's been sitting there in me, and I've said to you before this conversation, so I don't know if I want to be some of those things. Like, I don't know if I want to be out there on a limb, put it that way. And so I have my own sort of demons there, or my own battles that I'll need to pick. When you talk about, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a fan of the word sacrifice. When you say you need to make sacrifices, I'm always like, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way not to have to make sacrifice. That's my natural response, because I always say, and I've had this conversation with people, especially women, to say, just make the sacrifices that you fully wanted to make in the moment. So I think I need to find my version of that, and there's going to be certain language that is going to appeal to me in the way that I do that.
Yeah. No, that's fine. If I could comment on something else you were saying earlier, I get you, and you alluded to it there, where you kind of, I'm activated and I'm more ready for something. And you were saying, you know, I dipped into this when I was in my 20s and a bit in my 30s and so forth. I think that for anybody listening, this is a really good example about how the ideas are often there, and, you know, and how we need to become the person capable of them. Like, you know, and I didn't know you in your 20s, but over time, if you continue to follow that curiosity and follow your skills, the clarity that you're achieving now, because of the right moment, you know, pressure from the outside world, you know, your own activation of like this kind of inner desire to be like, no, the world cannot be this way, is bringing together all of those experiences into something that is concrete and bringing it into form. And I think that it's a really, really good example for people of what does this look like in real life. You know, we don't wake up one morning and think, oh my God, I'm going to do this, and, you know, it's going to change everything and it's going to be done really quickly. The reality is that all of these life experiences eventually start to come together into one thing, that, or a number of things that we are doing. Like, so for example, something I'm very passionate about, and one of the reasons I speak to leadership teams and do a lot of corporate speaking, is that one of the most powerful mediums in the world is business. And, you know, if we want business to be better, we have to be better. Us, the individuals that work in that business, not like somebody that's sitting in an ivory office, us. So when I go in to speak to leadership teams and to companies, like, you know, we make business better. So we have to be better. That's it. We make business better. And that is a combination of the fact that I have 20 years international business experience. You know, I understand the context of the people. I've also been on my own journey, and I'm able to wrap that all up now and bring it into form as something that is contributing to the world. But it has taken quite a long time to get that clarity and be able to pull all those threads of who I am together into an offering to the world that makes sense and can be impactful. And I suppose both of those stories are, how does this happen over time for us?
I think it's really important, because the media loves the overnight success, right? I woke up one morning on somebody's couch and then had to transform my life. And actually, no, this stuff is probably there within us. And this is why I love coaching work and vision work, because we're often drawing on some of that stuff that's deep down. You know, in my 20s, I was doing a lot of this meditation. I then went off before uni to teach voluntarily in Nepal for 6 months and go and do silent meditation. So I wasn't even just dabbling. I was pretty full on even from then. But obviously, I was also carving out a career. So I guess, to me, at every stage, we can have our version of what it looks like for us. And going back to the idea that, Dharma, there's no sort of single grand one. Today, it might look different for me and how it feels than it might in 10 years. And I'm always happy for that evolution to be there. Although there may just be some specific times when there's a bit more of a step up and more of that deepening activation.
And that's a question I also think that has been happening to me this year. I'm almost deeper in my work this year, with an insistence on myself that what is happening to the world. And if I was ever in any doubt about the work that I want to do, I find myself just deepening into that work and the urgency. And I don't like using that word too much urgency, because I think that can keep us from purpose, because we're looking for an answer tomorrow. But I suppose there is a sense of urgency in the world right now. And what that has done is deepened me into myself. And it's why I keep going back to that word Dharma, because a friend of mine said it a few weeks ago to me as well. Like, you know, you need your wise counsel around you. Like, I need people who also say it to me. And she said to me, just like, I was really activated one day, like really, really inflamed by what was going on. And she was like, just stay with your Dharma, Fiona, just stay with your Dharma. Like, and it was really soothing in the moment. Like, your work is really meaningful. Like, you know, your work is really meaningful. Your work is about the long haul change of the world. And just stay there. Doesn't mean I can't do anything in the moment, you know. It doesn't mean that I can't, like, you know, contribute in the moment as well. But just to stay with what your longer term contribution is, and to really, really go after that in the world.
Yes. And I think, the reason why urgency works is because what is urgent is it gets
Yes,
done,
exactly.
right? And so that urgency sort of can precede activation. And it might be that catalyst that kind of moves you from a space of having some ideas and thoughts to actually wanting to take that into the world in a different way. So I think they do go hand in hand. And yeah, and I appreciate that. Okay, this has been really helpful. I want to just have a quick look at a couple of my notes to see what else I wanted to ask you about. Okay, so the other thing that you mentioned was in one of your recent articles was the idea that purpose is a form of resistance, and it doesn't need to necessarily be going marching in the streets, although that can be a version of it. But I wondered if you would expand on that a little bit to give people a sense of how the different channels that they might have available to them when sometimes we only see a few specific routes.
Sure. So that piece, and we can share the link in the show notes so people can read that piece that I wrote.
Yes.
So I suppose one of the things I like to say is the resource we need most is humanity. So humanity is what's going to save the world in multifaceted. The fact that we tap into our humanity, the fact that each of us are a resource in the world. So when you feel that kind of apathy about can I do nothing, go back to the idea that a company is 100 people coming together. You are a pillar in that post, that. And how we choose to use ourselves as a resource. So even if you're not clear about, how am I actioning purpose in the world, how you choose to use yourself as a resource in the world goes back to that Dharma alignment. Who am I in the world and how do I use my gifts and my person as in service of contribution to other people. So service is a big thing, obviously linked to purpose. Service, contribution, impact, whatever word you want to use. And I do that through the person that I am in community. That's why in the last podcast, when we talked about, the desire to ensure that our communities remain cohesive, that is part of me, that I will not give in to this idea that you are going to polarize us more. I won't do it. We are powerful together. We are powerful in community. So as one member of my community, it is part of my role to ensure that we are cohesive. In terms of how I spend money, it is part of my role to ask myself, how am I spending money? How am I aiding the world as it is by mindlessly spending money in the world? And that is something that I'm always working on, because I don't even feel informed enough to get it right. I'm constantly researching, where things, for example, clothes is a big thing that I feel really strongly about. The amount of fashion in the world. Come back to what you say about women and children, often made by women and children in developing countries, so, and if I'm spending very little on a top or anything like that, somebody else has paid the price for, how cheap that is, So that for me is a form of being in alignment, trying to understand that more and how I can just make sure that I'm not adding to a problem that already exists. Yes, I can protest, and I think peaceful protest is very powerful, because as we've seen, it shows that the people are demanding a change in stance, and that is starting to filter through in politics. So I think that also works. And then also the work that we do, where the organizations we work for, the work that we do, our insistence within those organizations that they also lead with purpose. So I'm not a fan of meeting the aggression of the world with more aggression, because I think that just again leads to that's just helping somebody else. That's not helping me. But how can I just get more and more clarity about the person that I want to be in the world, and how I allow myself as a person to be used in the world, in my communities, in my workplace, in the actions that I take globally. And that is a form of protest, because it's conscious. You're actually consciously making choices about how you use yourself in the world. And the systems and the power dynamics and the inequality of the world remain when we are not conscious about the choices that we make. So that's why I think purpose is a form of protest, because it's going back to what you said about somebody saying, I don't have any power. You do have power. You have power in the smallest possible ways, and you don't necessarily have to be Martin Luther King, or you don't have to be a great leader, but you absolutely have some power in the life that you're currently living. And you mentioned earlier on about, there are definitely people in the world who have no power at the moment, and we're all watching what's happening to the people in Gaza. That is even more of a reason to understand the agency, and
you use the power that you do have.
Use the agency that you do have to influence the companies, the politicians, the life, the people around you, and to do that in a way that builds the world and community that we want, rather than just continuing to allow it to be torn apart. And all of those strong, small actions are what lead to things. I mean, I give examples like 15 years ago, I never saw any company involved in Pride marches. Now every company wants to be involved in that. That did not come from the company. That came from the people that were working there. It came from the insistence from the community that they wanted that support. I saw it here in terms of the marriage equality. That did not come from politicians. It came from people, coalitions of people coming together. You know, we talk about, and I give out about purpose statements because they can be a bit of purpose washing, as I call it. But the reason that they even exist is because employees and people started asking companies, what are you doing to better the world? So if you don't think that any of those things matter, just look at those movements and say they didn't happen overnight. They always take time. But they started off with small groups of people actually demanding a different conversation was going to happen. So for me, it's about like just, and it has to go back to, you have to be having the inner conversations with yourself about taking the time to kind of understand who you are and what matters to you. And like your example, and what is my thing that I'm going to do? Like, you know, what is mine that I'm supposed to be doing in the world? Yeah. And I 9 times out of 10, we kind of know what that is anyway. We're just unsure about how we're going to make it real. Like, people often laugh at me. They were like, how did you know you were going to speak? And I said, just knew. I knew that immediately. I had been speaking. I worked in investor relations before. I spoke at conferences all over the world. It was my thing. You know, I spoke. My expertise was in investment, but I went and I gave, you know, keynotes at conferences. But my voice is my part of my Dharma. I've no doubt about that. Like, you talk about how I write, I'm always trying to, you know, oh no, I have actually a different idea about that. So I have to sit down and make that real by writing it out and then communicating that to others. And I know that that is part of what I'm supposed to do. And partly because I'm good at it. You know, you're not supposed to have purpose in life is not go off and do something that you're bad at. You know, I kind of think you have gifts and qualities and interests, and they are pointing you in the direction of where you should be focusing that. So like, for example, yes, you focusing on women and children, I'm a big supporter of that, but it's not my focus. Like, to the kind of way, it's not my focus. Okay, because, you know, we all have to shine our own piece of the cosmos.
Yes. And this is where questions, you know, what does actually trigger you, what does activate you, are important for all of us to go and think about, because that can be our breadcrumb to finding, and then also what lights you up. Yeah. So as you've been talking, I've been thinking about a few very small examples, and I do just want to offer the listeners that question of, is there something small that you can start with today? Mm-hmm. Hearing what Fiona's talked about, which is that these things are small initially, they compound over time, and then they add up. And we're not trying to do it all tomorrow. We're trying to incorporate these. And the sense of personal empowerment that will give you momentum to do more. Yeah. So is there something small that you can start with? In fact, make it small, mm-hmm. because then it's
if you make it small, happen. It's the only way it ever happens, you know? So it could be anything.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And I just want to offer some sort of maybe non-related top examples that are not as directly related to some of what we talked about, like the composting that I'm doing. There's no fertilizers going on in the garden, and I'm using the waste of our garden to put back into the soil. Now, this one is just intrinsically joyful for me. I intrinsically enjoy doing it. But the connection that it is giving me with the earth is very powerful. So it's a separate issue that we haven't talked about today. But just thinking about some of those little things that you're already doing, and then being able to add to those. The other example I just want to give, which is related to the current crisis, is just talking with my kids. And so if things are like around meal times, and maybe we're not a family that does officially prayers, but you can set intentions into the world, you can set wishes and hopes into the world. So I've been cultivating different wishes and hopes with the kids, and so that they can be thinking of those other children in the rest of the world, and for them to be tuned in to the fact that this is a live issue that we can in our own way embody responses to. So I just wanted to give some other small examples as well.
Maybe I can offer some to those as well, because these are overwhelming conversations for people. It's just like, the mountain's too big, so I'm not going to climb it, you know. So I could totally appreciate where you're from. I'm going to send you another article that I wrote, and it was called The Soft Power of Silence, and I wrote it in January. I don't know whether you saw it, where after, let's say, there was a change in leadership globally in January, and there was a lot of kind of vitriol on social media, and everybody had a comment on this, that and the rest, and like, the comments were all valid. And I purposely didn't post on social media for the whole of January, because I was like, I really just don't need add my voice to this. And I really don't need to, because distraction is now a tactic. We're all fighting with each other on social media about these things, but those people are still going off and, like, you know, acting with authoritarian tendencies, let's call it that. And I thought, you know, I can write and I can use my gifts and my creativity and I can write a million posts and think about things, and I'm sure I'd get loads of likes and they'd be shared and everything like that. And then I would get to the end of that month and nothing would have changed in the world. So that was not a good use of my time. So instead I wrote an article called The Soft Power of Silence, basically where, you know, there are moments in time when the best thing to do is to pull back and to sit in silence, which is common to all of the spiritual traditions of the world. Is, you know, silence provides us with clarity, and to sit and think about, you know, and what am I going to do? You know, to be with yourself and to get that connection to yourself and clarity about the next step. And I said that, again, going back to that idea of Dharma, I got to the end of that month and I was writing that article and I was like, oh, I'm just so clear about, like, I'm here for the long haul, people, like, you know, so, you know, and this is very current and it's not going away anytime soon, but I have a big plan about the impact that I'm going to have. So I share this with people as a kind of a first step I often give to people is create some space in your life. Find a time to go for a walk in nature. Find a time to spend an hour on your own every week and think about things, because one of the great wins of our current structures is we're so busy. So some of the apathy that we might see in other people is, I'm working 60 hours a week, my childcare is a disaster, and now you want me to care about the world. Like, do you know what I mean? I totally get that. And one of the antidotes to that is, how can I create space in my life? And that is almost an act of revolution in the world at the moment, you know, because that again is disruptive to the system that will have you work, and then just die, you know? So, like, you know, that there is you're trying to, like, you know, what is that word that you just say? You're trying to break your circuit break, you know, kind of the what the system is creating in your life, and go and create some space and think and go for a nice walk on the beach or wherever it is that you live, and have some space in your life to be connected with yourself and ask yourself, what is the next step forward? What is the small next step forward?
Absolutely love this. This has been so empowering just for me to have this conversation with you. And I hope that through listening to it, it has also given you guys some ideas as well. Please let me know how it's landed. And thank you again.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's been just as helpful for me as it has been for you. So I've been very grateful to be here.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. And I look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye-bye.